The second friend I acquired died longer before, Samuel Johnson. He was born in 1709 in England. He barely survived the ordeal of his birth. He was handed over to a wet nurse whose milk infected him with tuberculosis, rendering him blind in one eye, deaf in one ear. He developed smallpox, which left him scarred. They performed surgery on his jaw, which left scars all down his face. They opened his arm to bleed him and left the wound open for 6 years. He soon developed what we think is Tourette's syndrome and OCD. He was twisting and rolling about. He failed as a student. He failed as a teacher. His life at age 30 was what he called radically wretched. Suicide attempts. It was a very unsuccessful life. And out of that suffering, but he turned that suffering into something. The first thing suffering does, and it should be said there's nothing intrinsically noble about suffering, but as Paul Tillich wrote, what suffering does, it drags you deeper into yourself. It drags you beneath the daily cares of life and reminds you you're not who you thought you were. Tillich wrote that what suffering does, it carves into the basement of your soul and then carves through the floor, revealing a cavity below, carves through that floor, revealing a cavity below. And what suffering created in Johnson was a radical self-honesty. And we think of humility as thinking lowly of yourself, but my favorite definition of humility is radical self-awareness from a position of other-centeredness. Radical self-awareness from a distance. And Johnson achieved that. He walked to London and he started writing. And this is what Trinity Forum does. He wrote his way to goodness. He developed a firm understanding of the world just by taking each of his weaknesses and writing about them. He couldn't control his own body, but he needed to control his own mind by anchoring it in the reality of the truth. And so he wrote about sloth, he wrote about envy, he had a radical curiosity. If somebody told him there was a river in Oxford where people were drowning, he jumped right into the river to see what it was like. If somebody told him that if you stuck 2 balls in a musket and shoot it, it will explode. So he stuck 7 balls in and shot it against the wall. His subjects of his essays were the things that plagued him: sloth, envy, guilt, boredom, sorrow. And he just grabbed them each by the hand. And over the course of that, as one biographer wrote, the iron entered his soul. He became from a scattered, disorganized person to a very stable and a very giving one. It created amazing work ethic in him. The French Academy took 40 scholars and 50 years to write the first French dictionary. Johnson did it alone with 6 clerks in 8 years. He would write for friends. A friend of his was given a lectureship at Oxford called the Blackstone Law Lectureship. Unfortunately, his friend knew no law. So Johnson said, I'll write the lectures for you. He wrote 1,600 pages of text for free for his friend. Between 68 and 72, he wrote The Lives of the Poet, 52 biographies containing 378,000 words. This hunger to express. He had a great social club, Edmund Burke, Adam Smith, but he also at his home kept in strays. People who had nowhere else to go, former prostitutes, slaves, a doctor with no money, 10, 13 people living with him at a time. And there was a largeness to him, a generosity of spirit. And that was all created out of intellectual honesty. And so when he died, one of his colleagues wrote, "He has made a chasm which not only nothing can fill up, but which nothing has a tendency to fill up. Johnson is dead, let us go with the next best. There is nobody. No man can said to be put you in mind of Johnson." So from Johnson, we learn how to turn suffering into self-understanding and the importance of radical curiosity and the intellectual effort, and the way intellectual effort can lead to actually moral goodness.